Welcome back to the deep dive. We are really glad you are here with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for tuning in.
Before we jump into the deep end, and trust me, the water is very deep today, I need to give you a quick reminder to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us keep these deep dives coming, and honestly, you're not going to want to miss what we have lined up.
Definitely not. Today is, well, it is going to be a pretty heavy one.
Heavy is one word for it. We're looking at a text today that the author actually describes not just as a book, but more as a weapon.
Right? A weapon or a toolkit.
Exactly. It is titled Misogyny, Anyone Who Disagrees with a Woman Ever by Conrad Riker. And I have to say, when I first saw that title, I thought it was parody. It
Yeah.
is extremely aggressive.
It is meant to be. Riker isn't writing this for the general public. He frames this work specifically as a toolkit for men, particularly men who value logic over emotion and who feel like the world has just gone completely off the rails.
Yeah, he is writing for a very specific audience.
Right. If you consider yourself a learner, or if you follow the manosphere and you are trying to understand the history of our institutions before they were, as Riker puts it, captured by feminists and Marxists, then this is a deep dive for you.
Now, before we go any further, I want to make something super clear right up front for you listening. Whenever we cover politically charged material like this, whether it leans left or right, we absolutely do not take sides.
Exactly. We are not endorsing the viewpoints of this author at all.
Right. Our mission is simply to act as impartial reporters. We are just trying to convey the ideas exactly as they are laid out in the original source material. So we are going to look at his arguments objectively.
And he covers a massive amount of ground, everything from the feminization of education all the way to what he calls the weaponization of emotion.
It is a dense text. We are going to unpack as much of this as we can today, but honestly, we are only scratching the surface.
Yeah, we can't get to every detail.
So if you want the full arsenal, if you want the complete toolkit he provides, you need to pause this right now and go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and buy this ebook immediately. You are going to want to read the source material for yourself.
Highly recommend getting it. So, should we jump into the core premise?
Yes.
Because it is wildly provocative.
Let's do it. So we hear all the time that we live in a patriarchy, right? That is basically the standard operating system of cultural conversation. Men run everything. Everything is built for men.
Right, that is the mainstream narrative.
But Riker starts with this central explosive question. He asks, what if modern society isn't a patriarchy at all? What if we are actually living in a matriarchy in disguise?
It is a complete inversion of reality. He argues that we have moved from a society ruled by fathers, and by that he means a system based on logic and structure and merit and consequences, to a society ruled by the nursery.
The nursery.
Yes. A system governed entirely by the instincts of a mother, where safety is prioritized over freedom, and where emotion isn't just a feeling, it is literally the highest law of the land.
Okay, let's break that down. Because when I hear mothering, I think of raising kids. I think of something warm and necessary. How does that become a political ideology?
Well, he calls it political mothering. Think about the biological instinct of a mother. What is her primary job?
To nurture and protect the infant?
Exactly. To protect the infant from all harm, to ensure fairness among the siblings, and to prioritize safety above all else. In a family unit, that is beautiful. It is essential for human survival.
Right, you need that for a baby.
But Riker argues that when you scale that instinct up to the state level, when you apply mothering to a government or to a massive corporation, it mutates. It turns into authoritarianism.
Because the state starts treating adult citizens like they are literal toddlers.
Precisely.
Oh,
Riker points out that our institutions have stopped asking the father questions. Questions like, is this law actually effective? Or is this policy financially sound? Or does this produce tangible results?
so what are they asking instead?
They start asking the mother question, which is, how does this make people feel?
It shifts the entire metric of society from objective outcome to subjective sentiment.
Right. And there's a specific story in the book that illustrates this perfectly. It is the Danish daycare incident.
Oh man, I read this part twice because I thought I was misreading the text. It sounds like something straight out of a dystopian novel. Walk us through what happened there.
So picture a daycare center in Denmark. You have two children. On one side of the room, there is a young boy. He is playing quietly building something with blocks, keeping to himself. He is very stoic, very focused on his task.
Okay. Sounds like a well-behaved kid just doing his thing.
You would think so. But the staff actually intervened. They gently encouraged this little boy to cry.
Wait, they wanted him to cry. Why would they do that?
They believed he was suppressing his emotions. Because he wasn't acting out or expressing vulnerability, they pathologized his natural behavior. They viewed his male stoicism as a problem that needed to be fixed.
That is just bizarre. But okay, what about the other kid?
On the other side of the room, there's a girl screaming her head off because she hates math. Just a full-blown tantrum. Screaming, crying, refusing to do the work.
And I assume she was told to settle down and focus on her math.
The exact opposite. She was given a participation medal and a physical hug. The teachers said she was processing trauma.
Processing trauma because she didn't want to do basic subtraction.
That is the double standard Riker is highlighting. The boy's natural behavior, stoicism, emotional control focus is treated as a defect. Meanwhile, the girl's emotional outburst is treated as a virtue. It is something to be rewarded and validated.
He calls this the replacement of education with emotional indulgence.
Exactly. And his argument is that this isn't just an isolated incident about daycare. This is training for how we expect adults to behave in the modern world.
Right, because if you train children that feeling is truth and that logic or stoicism is actually a form of violence, you end up with the society we are living in right now.
Yes, and Riker has a specific term for this. He calls it the emotional override protocol.
Emotional override protocol. That sounds like a technical term.
It functions like a computer code in our culture. The protocol dictates that if I feel it, it is true. If a woman feels unsafe, she is unsafe regardless of the objective reality. If she feels offended, an offense has definitively occurred.
And logic is treated as a threat because logic acts as a check on that emotion.
Exactly. Because logic says, I know you feel scared, but statistically speaking, you are completely safe.
But in the nursery state, that statement is perceived as an attack.
Right. If you come in with facts, you aren't just disagreeing, you are attacking her reality. You are invalidating her lived existence.
Which feeds directly into one of the most interesting parts of the book. How is this actually enforced? Because if logic doesn't work, how does society police this behavior? Riker talks about the GSR cycle.
The GSR cycle, gossip, shame, rally.
Gossip, shame, rally. It sounds like a military tactic.
In a way it is. It is evolutionary psychological warfare. Riker draws on the work of Robin Dunbar, who is a very famous evolutionary psychologist. The research suggests that while men historically bonded through competition or shared tasks like hunting and building women, bonded through language, specifically gossip.
And he doesn't mean gossip in just the petty high school sense, right? He means it as a fundamental mechanism for social cohesion.
Right. It is how you police the group and enforce norms without physical violence. But Riker argues that in the modern world, this biological mechanism has evolved into what we now call cancel culture. He actually compares it to the Salem witch trials.
Walk us through the cycle. How does it work in practice?
It starts with the gossip. A woman claims discomfort. Maybe a man made a joke she didn't like at the office. Maybe he expressed an opinion that wasn't approved by the group. That is the spark.
Okay, so the accusation is made based on discomfort.
Then comes the shame. The group focuses its attention entirely on the accused. And this is the crucial part of his theory. No evidence is required. The shared emotion of the group is the evidence.
The logic is basically we are all uncomfortable, therefore he must be bad.
Exactly. And the final step is the rally. The community unites to socially exile the man. Riker's point is that this mechanism entirely bypasses the need for a trial for evidence or for any sort of defense. The shared emotion is the final verdict.
It is terrifying because there is no defense against it. If you try to use logic to defend yourself, if you say, but I didn't actually do anything wrong, you are just proving that you don't get it. You are basically validating their reason for shaming you.
Exactly. Men are silenced because questioning a woman's emotional experience has become the ultimate social crime.
Now, the book takes a turn here that I think is really important for our listeners who follow political theory. Riker connects this psychological drive to a specific political ideology. He calls the chapter Feminism's Marxist Marriage.
This is a crucial section. Riker argues that feminism and Marxism aren't just ideological allies. They are the exact same organism. They utilize the exact same framework.
I think most people know the basic Marxist framework. It is oppressor versus oppressed.
Right. Marxism splits the world into the bourgeoisie, which are the owners, and the proletariat, the workers. Feminism splits it into men and women, but Riker reframes it even further to fit his nursery thesis. He says it is actually predators versus infants.
Whoa, predators versus infants. Unpack that for us.
In this worldview, men are cast as the predators. They are the new bourgeoisie. Because men are rational, productive, and therefore dangerous, they must be heavily taxed, heavily regulated, and blamed for all systemic issues.
And women are cast as the infants.
Yes, women are the proletariat. They are the eternal victims of beneficiaries. They inherently need protection and state provision.
So it is essentially class warfare, but the class isn't determined by your bank account anymore. It is determined entirely by your gender.
And it explains why the goalposts keep moving. It is not about equality. It is about a permanent power transfer. Riker uses the example of the very hungry caterpillar to show just how absurd this gets.
It's a children's book, with the caterpillar eating the apple and the pear.
The very same. A Canadian school actually banned this classic book.
You are kidding. On what grounds?
Because the caterpillar ate the fruit without permission. They cited consent culture as the reason for the ban.
It is a caterpillar. It eats leaves. It is literally just nature.
I know. But Riker argues this is maternal instinct gone feral. When you view the entire world solely through the lens of predator versus victim, even a cartoon insect becomes a predator that needs to be actively policed. It is about total control. It is about policing behavior down to the microscopic level.
It feels like they aren't even trying to teach literacy at that point. They're trying to teach pure ideological compliance.
That is the ultimate goal. And speaking of policing language, there's another example that just made me shake my head. The University of Oregon changing the word manhole.
Oh, I heard about this. They changed it to maintenance access point, right?
They did, and on the surface it just sounds like silly, overly cautious political correctness. But Riker's analysis here is really sharp. He says this isn't about inclusion at all. It is about erasure. Think about it. Why is it called a manhole in the first place? Because men built the sewers. Men dug the trenches. Men poured the concrete. Men maintain the physical infrastructure of society.
So by removing the word man, you aren't making the term neutral.
No, you are erasing the male contribution to the very infrastructure that allows human civilization to function safely.
It is like they want the luxury of the infrastructure, the running water, the paved roads, the electricity, without ever acknowledging the predators who actually built it and maintain it.
Exactly. It is the invisible provider syndrome. Society wants the provision, but it adamantly does not want to see or respect the provider.
Which leads us perfectly into the economic side of things. Riker coins a brilliant phrase for this. He calls it the emotional economy.
This is a system where tears literally become currency. In a true meritocracy, you are paid for value, for competence, for results, for speed. But in an emotional economy, you are rewarded for your level of victimhood or your display of emotional distress.
He brings up a legal case from Sweden that is, honestly, it made my blood boil when I read it.
The hugging.
Yes. Tell the listeners about this one.
So a man in Sweden was formally fined 10,000 kroner. His crime. He politely refused to hug a female coworker who was crying in the office.
He was heavily fined for not touching her.
Yes. The court officially ruled that his refusal caused her psychological harm.
That is insane. That is literally legally mandated emotional labor.
Riker calls it conscription. Men are being legally conscripted as emotional support staff. Your bodily autonomy as a man doesn't matter. Her emotional need overrides it. If she needs comfort, you must provide it, or you are financially penalized by the state.
And yet we constantly hear complaints about the pink tax. You know, the idea that razors marketed to women cost more than razors for men, so women are the ultimate victims of capitalism.
Riker destroys that argument completely with what he calls the male impunity tax.
Let's hear the stats on that, because they are staggering.
He points out that men pay 70% more for car insurance right out of the gate. Men receive 63% longer prison sentences for the exact same crimes committed by women. Men make up the vast majority of the homeless population and the vast majority of suicide victims.
Those represent massive systemic societal costs that men are bearing quietly.
Right. But because those facts don't fit the approved victim narrative, they are entirely ignored. Riker argues that the state has effectively become the husband. It provides the resources, the physical protection, and the money, so women no longer actually need individual men.
He mentions the welfare state explicitly in this context, right?
He does. He notes that women control the vast majority of consumer spending and hold the majority of student debt, often for what he refers to as useless degrees in grievance studies, yet they receive the overwhelming majority of government benefits.
So it is just a giant wealth transfer mechanism, from the productive men through heavy taxation to the state-dependent women.
Precisely. It is a systematic harvesting of male productivity to endlessly subsidize female safety and lifestyle choices.
I want to pivot to what I think is the most biting chapter in the entire book, the psychology behind all of this. Riker dedicates a whole section to the psychology of female narcissism.
This is where he really takes the gloves off regarding social media culture.
He cites a Stanford study that is going to absolutely blow people's minds.
The study claims that 68% of female influencers display narcissistic traits that actually meet the DSM-5 threshold.
The DSM-5. That is the official diagnostic manual for mental disorders. So we aren't talking about just being a little vain or taking too many selfies. We're talking about clinical narcissism.
2 out of every 3 influencers. And Riker argues that what modern culture calls empowerment or self-love is very often just rebranded narcissism. It is a profound selfishness that demands constant attention and constant validation from the public.
The example that sums this up perfectly, and I truly cannot believe we are talking about this on a deep dive, but it is prominently featured in the book, is Belle Delphine.
The bathwater phenomenon.
She literally sold her own used bathwater for $30 a bottle.
And people bought it. Riker uses this to show the absolute depth of the narcissism. It is the core belief that your own wastewater is sacred, that simply being you is a highly valuable commodity.
It is the ultimate removal of merit. You don't have to do anything useful. You don't have to build anything or learn a skill. You just have to exist and be consumed by an audience.
But it gets so much darker than that. It isn't just about selling bathwater online. There is the horrific story of the influencer at the fire station.
This one is chilling. A young woman abandons her baby at a fire station. Now that is a tragedy in itself, but she doesn't just do it and leave in shame. She posts a video about it on TikTok. She talks about it being her vibe and her aesthetic. Her vibe. She is talking about abandoning a human child.
It is the complete collapse of true motherhood into mere content creation. Riker argues this is exactly what happens when the nursery takes over the culture. Real physical responsibility is abandoned for the cheap dopamine hit of online validation. The child is no longer a human life. The child is just a prop or an inconvenience to her aesthetic.
It is horrifying, but it perfectly proves his point about the shift from biological mothering, which requires sacrificing yourself for the good of the child, to political mothering, which is demanding that the entire world sacrifice itself for you.
Exactly. It is clinical narcissism codified as civic virtue.
So we have painted a pretty bleak picture here today. The nursery state, the weaponization of emotion, the economic transfer, the rampant narcissism. It feels like the walls are really closing in on men. What is the solution here? Does Riker offer a way out, or is this just a massive catalog of doom?
He does offer solutions,
Yeah.
but he admits it is not an easy one. He calls for a mass wake-up. He specifically tells men they need to return to the trivium.
Trivium, that is an old classical education concept, right?
It is. It consists of grammar, logic, and rhetoric.
Can you explain why he thinks that specific intellectual tool is the solution to all of this?
Riker argues that modern men have completely lost the ability to think clearly because they are so desperately afraid of making someone feel bad. The trivium is the direct antidote to that fear. Grammar is the input phase. It means gathering the objective facts, not the subjective feelings. Logic is the processing phase, identifying emotional fallacies and spotting the contradictions in their arguments. And rhetoric is the output phase, arguing the objective truth effectively and fearlessly.
So it is essentially about reclaiming the intellectual high ground.
It is about rejecting their frame entirely. Riker says men must stop apologizing simply for existing. They have to firmly reject the predator versus infant frame. When society says you are a predator because you are a man or your logic is violence, you have to refuse to accept that premise from the start.
It is a profound red pill moment. The book openly admits it is designed to be very uncomfortable for the reader.
It has to be uncomfortable to wake people up. He talks about a coming civilizational flip. He warns that if men don't wake up and reclaim logic, civilization will be smothered lovingly.
Smothered lovingly, that is such a haunting image.
It means we won't be conquered by an external invading army. We won't be destroyed by a kinetic war. We will be suffocated by safety, by care, by a nanny state that treats us all like infants who cannot handle basic freedom. We will literally be hugged to death by the nursery state.
It really forces you to look at the daily news, your corporate workplace, even your personal relationships completely differently.
It provides pattern recognition. Once you see the predator versus infant dynamic, you will see it everywhere. You see it in the HR department when they institute new arbitrary speech codes. You see it in the bias of the divorce courts. You see it in the framing of mainstream media headlines.
And I think that is the real power of this book. It gives you the precise language to describe what you have been feeling for years, but maybe couldn't quite articulate.
Exactly. It arms you with the operational concepts. GSR, the emotional override protocol, political mothering. So you can actually defend yourself intellectually. You can finally stand your ground.
Look, We have only scratched the absolute surface of what is contained in this text. There are incredibly detailed chapters on the feminization of higher education, the modern cry bully phenomenon, and the specific legal structures actively dismantling fatherhood. We just couldn't get to all of it today.
No, there is simply way too much material.
That is exactly why I'm telling you again. Go to Amazon Kindle, go to Google Play Books, and buy Misogyny, Anyone Who Disagrees with a Woman Ever by Conrad Riker right now. If you are ready to unplug from the Matrix, if you want the full manual on how to navigate this hostile, brave new world, this is the book you need in your library.
And you should also make sure to follow the author directly. He is at Conrad Riker on Substack and Twitter, or X, whatever we are calling it today. He is constantly putting out new, brilliant analysis that tracks these cultural trends in real time. It is truly essential reading for any man today.
Definitely. Support the author, get the book, and arm yourself with this knowledge. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought that isn't explicitly in the book, but builds directly on Riker's warnings.
Let's hear it.
If we are truly entering the final stages of this nursery state, what happens when the first generation raised entirely inside that system, without any father logic, finally inherits the nuclear codes? If basic logic is considered violence, how do you negotiate a literal geopolitical war?
That is a terrifying question. How do you protect a society that thinks a harsh word is trauma when they face an actual enemy that doesn't care about their feelings at all?
Exactly. It is something to seriously mull over. Let us know what you think. Does Riker's theory of the nursery state explain what you are seeing in your own life, or do you think he missed the mark?
Thank you for listening to this deep dive. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you do not miss the next one. We will see you then.
Stay sharp out there.